The highway at night is a different world. For truckers who spend their lives on these endless ribbons of asphalt, the darkness holds secrets that most people never witness. Some encounters can't be explained by fatigue or tricks of the light. These are 8 true stories from drivers who came face to face with something that defied all logic. Ghost trucks that appear from nowhere, vehicles that shouldn't exist, encounters that left permanent scars on those who survived them. These aren't campfire tales or urban legends. These are the experiences that made seasoned drivers abandon routes, quit the industry, or never drive alone again. What you're about to hear comes from the logbooks of the damned. Story first, the Phantom Convoy. Marcus Holloway had been hauling freight across Interstate 80 for 19 years when he encountered something that ended his career. It was November 2019, and he was making his usual run from Des Moines to Omaha, a route he'd driven hundreds of times. The night was clear, temperature hovering just above freezing, and his 16 Kenworth was running smooth. He'd fueled up at the pilot station in Adair and expected to reach his delivery point by 3 a.m. Around 1:45 in the morning, Marcus noticed headlights in his mirrors. Not unusual, except these lights had appeared suddenly, without gradually catching up to him like normal traffic would. Within seconds, the vehicle was directly behind him, close enough that the glare filled his cab. He couldn't make out what kind of truck it was through the brightness. He tapped his brakes gently, a signal for the tailgater to back off. The lights didn't budge. Marcus reached for his CB radio to warn the driver, but before he could key the mic, more headlights appeared. Not from behind this time, but materializing in the lanes beside him. 2 more trucks, keeping perfect pace with his rig. He glanced left, then right, trying to see the vehicles clearly, but the headlights were so intense they created a wall of white light. His dashboard clock read 1:47 a.m. His speedometer showed 68 miles per hour. The trucks matched his speed exactly. He tried to slow down. The truck slowed with him. He accelerated to 75. They stayed in formation. Marcus's heart began hammering against his ribs. He grabbed the CB again. "This is Holloway on eastbound 80, mile marker 76. Anyone else seeing these trucks surrounding me?" Static answered him. He switched channels. More static. Every channel was dead, filled with white noise that made his ears ring. That's when he noticed his GPS. The screen showed his truck's icon, but the road beneath it was wrong. Instead of the familiar stretch of I-80, the map displayed a highway he didn't recognize, running through terrain that didn't exist in Iowa. The surrounding landscape on his GPS showed mountains and deep forests. He looked out his windshield at the actual road. Flat Nebraska plains stretched in every direction just as they should. The convoy of phantom trucks pressed closer. Marcus could now see they weren't reflecting his headlights properly. The chrome surfaces should have gleamed, but instead, they seemed to absorb light, creating dark voids in the shapes of semi-trucks. He noticed something else. His temperature gauge was dropping. The heater was running full blast, but frost was forming on the inside of his windows. At 1:52 a.m., his radio crackled to life, not with a human voice, but with the sound of diesel engines revving in sequence, like a mechanical chorus. Then came the voices. Multiple drivers speaking in overlapping fragments. "Can't stop. Exit's gone. Been driving for... How long has it been? Can't find the way out." The voices were distorted, desperate, pleading. Marcus screamed into the CB. "Who is this? What's happening?" The voices stopped. In the sudden silence, he heard something worse. His own voice, crackling through the speaker, repeating words he'd just spoken, but with a hollow, distant quality. "Who is this? What's happening?" his recorded voice asked, as if from very far away. He made a decision born of pure panic. The next exit was coming up in half a mile, exit 75 to Walnut. He would take it no matter what. As he approached the off-ramp, The phantom trucks began to fade, not pulling away, but actually becoming transparent, like they were dissolving into the night air. The headlights dimmed from blinding white to pale blue, then to nothing. Marcus took the exit doing 50 miles per hour, way too fast, his trailer swaying dangerously. He didn't care. He pulled into the first parking lot he found, a closed gas station, and sat there shaking for 20 minutes. His GPS was working normally again. The temperature had returned to normal. His CB was picking up regular chatter from other drivers on the interstate. He checked his logbook. According to his electronic logs, he'd lost 18 minutes. From 1:47 to 2:05 a.m., there was no record. The system showed a gap, as if his truck hadn't existed during that time. But Marcus remembered every second of those 18 minutes. He remembered the cold, the voices, the feeling of being trapped in a convoy heading nowhere. Marcus finished his delivery that night, then drove straight to his company's terminal. He turned in his resignation before the sun came up. When his dispatcher asked why a 19-year veteran was quitting without notice, Marcus told him the truth. The dispatcher pulled up Marcus's truck data. The GPS tracking confirmed the 18-minute gap. No location data, no speed, no engine information, nothing. 3 months later, Marcus learned about another driver who'd reported a similar experience on the same stretch of I-80 back in 2003. That driver had also quit immediately after. Marcus tried to find him to compare stories, but the man had disappeared. His last known address was abandoned, and his family claimed they hadn't heard from him in years. Marcus doesn't drive anymore. He took a warehouse job in his hometown. Sometimes, late at night, his phone's GPS will glitch, showing him traveling at 68 miles per hour on a highway that doesn't exist, surrounded by markers for trucks that were never there. He deletes the app and reinstalls it, but it always happens again. The phantom convoy is still out there, and somewhere in its data stream, Marcus knows he's still driving with them, trapped in those 18 missing minutes, forever trying to find an exit that will let him escape. Story second, the mirror rig. Sandra Vega specialized in overnight hauls along Highway 95 through Nevada, a desolate stretch where civilization appeared in small, scattered doses between vast expanses of nothing. She'd been driving for 12 years and prided herself on handling isolation better than most. On March 14, 2021, that confidence shattered during a run from Las Vegas to Reno. The night started normally. Sandra departed at 10 p.m. with a load of electronics, expecting to arrive by 6 a.m. The highway was empty, which wasn't unusual for a Sunday night. Her Freightliner Cascadia hummed along at a steady 70 miles per hour, cruise control engaged, satellite radio playing classic rock at low volume. At 1:30 a.m., approaching the town of Tonopah, she noticed another truck in her mirrors. It was far back, maybe a mile, but visible because of the long, straight stretch of road. Sandra didn't think much of it. Company, even at a distance, was better than total isolation. 30 minutes later, the truck was still there, maintaining the exact same distance. Sandra found this odd. Most drivers either caught up and passed or fell further behind. This one stayed perfectly positioned, like it was tethered to her by an invisible rope. She adjusted her speed, dropping to 65. The truck behind her slowed proportionally. She increased to 75. So did her shadow. Sandra activated her rear-facing dashcam display to get a better look at the vehicle. What she saw made her breath catch. The truck behind her was identical to hers. Same model Freightliner Cascadia, same color, same configuration. Even the trailer looked like a match. She squinted at the screen, trying to make out the company logo, but the image was too grainy in the darkness. She grabbed her CB. "This is Vega on northbound 95, mile marker 119. Got a Cascadia behind me. You hauling electronics by chance? No respo? NSE." She tried again. Silence. The truck maintained its distance, headlights burning steady in her mirrors. Then Sandra noticed something that made her stomach clench. Her trailer had a distinctive dent in the left rear panel from a loading dock incident in Phoenix. In the dashcam display, she could see the truck behind her had the same dent, in the exact same location. She told herself it was a coincidence, a trick of the camera resolution. She reached for her phone to check the time, 2:07 a.m. When she looked back at the dash cam screen, the truck behind her was closer, not by a little. It had halved the distance, and she hadn't seen it approach. One moment it was a mile back, the next it was 500 yards away. Sandra's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She accelerated to 80. The truck behind her surged forward, closing to 300 yards. In the clearer image, Sandra could now see details that made her skin crawl. The trailer's serial number was visible, partially. The digits she could make out matched her own trailer's number. She was being followed by a truck identical to her own, driven by someone she couldn't see. Sandra made a split-second decision. She cut her lights completely, simultaneously killing her running lights through a switch override. Dangerous and illegal, but she needed to know something. In total darkness, her rig vanished into the Nevada night. She watched her mirrors, waiting to see if the truck behind her would maintain its headlights, giving away its position. Her blood turned to ice. The truck behind her had also gone dark. She could see nothing in her mirrors, but she knew it was there, matching her movements perfectly in the darkness. She flipped her lights back on. The pursuing truck's lights activated simultaneously, the beams hitting her mirrors in the same instant her own headlights illuminated the road. Sandra's CB crackled. "This is Vega on northbound 95, mile marker 119. Her own voice, exact intonation, exact timing. The transmission she'd made 15 minutes ago was replaying. "Got a Cascadia behind me. You hauling electronics by chance?" "No," Sandra whispered to herself in her cab. "No, this isn't possible." The reply came through the CB, in her voice. "No, this isn't possible." The timing was perfect, the words matching her lips. She was hearing herself speak through the radio with zero delay, as if the truck behind her contained a version of her speaking the exact same words at the exact same moment. She saw a turnoff ahead, a rest area at mile marker 137. Sandra decided to pull off, to force a confrontation, to end this nightmare. She signaled her intention, watching her mirrors. The truck behind her activated its turn signal in perfect synchronization. They took the exit together, two identical trucks moving as one. The rest area was empty, just a small parking lot with bathrooms and vending machines under flickering fluorescent lights. Sandra pulled into the far end and stopped. The other truck pulled into the same spot, occupying the same space, phasing through her vehicle like a ghost. Sandra leapt from her cab, stumbling in her panic. She spun around to look at her truck. It sat alone in the parking lot, exactly as expected. No other vehicle was present. She ran to the back of her trailer, checking the serial number. It matched her registration. She was alone, but when she returned, Ed to her cab and checked the dashcam footage. The recording showed two trucks, her rig and another, occupying the same physical space, their forms overlapping in a nauseating double image. The driver's door of the phantom truck was opening in the recording, and a figure was stepping out, wearing a jacket identical to Sandra's, with dark hair pulled back in the same ponytail. Sandra didn't wait to see more. She climbed into her cab, started the engine, and pulled back onto Highway 95, driving through the night at 85 miles per hour, well over the safe limit. She completed her delivery in Reno, then immediately requested a route change from her dispatcher. She would never drive Highway 95 alone at night again. 2 weeks later, Sandra received a call from the Nevada Highway Patrol. They'd recovered her Freightliner Cascadia from a rest area at mile marker 137. The truck was abandoned, trailer still loaded with electronics. The driver's door was open. Sandra's personal belongings were inside. The electronic logs showed the truck had been parked there since 2:47 a.m. on March 14th. Sandra was standing in her kitchen when she received this call, looking at her truck parked in her driveway, the same Freightliner Cascadia she'd driven home 2 weeks ago. She walked outside while the officer stayed on the line. She touched her truck, solid and real. She read the serial number on the trailer. It matched her registration. The officer was still talking. "Ma'am, we need you to come to Tonopah to identify the vehicle and explain the abandonment." Sandra hung up. She never called them back. She sold her truck within the month and left the trucking industry, sometimes late at night. Sandra checks the GPS on her old truck through the company's tracking system that she still has access to. The system shows 2 vehicles under her registration. One is marked as sold, stationary in a lot in California. The other is moving, driving endless loops on Highway 95, passing mile marker 137 every 47 minutes. The moving truck's logs show the driver's name as Sandra Vega, status active, currently on duty, destination unknown, story third, the backwards hauler. Keith Drummond had a simple rule for his 23 years of driving: never pick up hitchhikers, never deviate from the route, and never drive tired. On August 3rd, 2020, he followed all these rules perfectly and still encountered something that defied every law of physics he understood. Keith was hauling a load of furniture from Charlotte, North Carolina to Atlanta, Georgia, along Interstate 85. The route was familiar, almost boring in its predictability. He'd driven it twice a month for the past 5 years. He knew every exit, every truck stop, every speed trap. At 11:45 p.m., Keith was approaching the state line between North Carolina and South Carolina when he noticed unusual traffic ahead. A single truck was visible about a quarter mile in front of him, its taillights bright red in the darkness. Nothing strange about that, except for one detail that Keith's experienced eye caught immediately. The trailer's rear doors were facing forward. He blinked, certain he was seeing things wrong. But no, as he closed the distance, the configuration became clearer. The truck ahead was moving forward at highway speed, but its trailer was oriented backward, with the rear doors at the front, facing the cab. It was physically impossible. The kingpin coupling couldn't connect that way. Keith grabbed his CB. "This is Drummond on southbound 85, mile marker 12. Anyone else seeing this backwards trailer ahead?" A driver responded immediately. "What are you talking about, Drummond? I'm right behind you, and there's nothing ahead of you. Road's empty." Keith checked his mirrors. Sure enough, headlights were visible behind him, maybe 200 yards back. "Negative. I've got a rig right in front of me. Trailer's on backwards somehow." The other driver replied, "Brother, I've got a clear view. You're the only truck visible for miles. You feeling okay?" Keith stared at the truck ahead. It was real. He could see every detail. The trailer's rear license plate, the dot numbers, the reflective tape, and it was moving forward with its trailer backwards, an impossibility that was somehow happening right before his eyes. He decided to pass the vehicle, to get a look at the cab and figure out what he was really seeing. Keith pulled into the left lane and accelerated. As he drew alongside the truck, his entire body went cold. There was no cab. The trailer was moving by itself, or rather, it was connected to something he couldn't see. Where the tractor should have been, there was just empty highway, yet the trailer continued forward, pulled by invisible force. Keith's speedometer was reading 73 miles per hour, but relative to the phantom trailer, he wasn't gaining. He pushed his Peterbilt to 80. The impossible trailer kept pace. He could now see through the gap where the cab should be, watching the highway on the other side, and the image made his head hurt. Reality was bending around the vehicle, creating a distortion like heat shimmer, except the night was cool. Then the trailer began to change. The rear doors, facing forward, slowly swung open. Behind those doors wasn't the interior of a cargo space. It was another highway, but not the one Keith was driving on. This highway was crumbling, cracked, with vegetation growing through broken asphalt. Abandoned vehicles lined the shoulders, rusted and ancient. The sky beyond was wrong, a deep purple black with no stars. Keith slammed on his brakes, his trailer lurching behind him. The phantom truck should have pulled ahead, but it didn't. It slowed with him, maintaining its position alongside his cab. Now he was staring directly into those open doors, into that impossible highway beyond. A figure appeared in that other highway. Another truck, driving toward the opening, toward Keith's world. It was moving forward in that dimension, which meant it was approaching the doors from the inside. Keith watched in horror as the truck in that other place grew larger, closer, heading straight for the opening. His CB erupted with his own voice. "This is Drummond on southbound 85, mile marker 12. But the timing was wrong. He was hearing his own transmission from a minute ago, replaying at higher speed, like a recording being fast-forwarded. Anyone else seeing this backwards trailer ahead? The words warbled and distorted. The truck from the other highway reached the open doors. Keith saw its cab emerge into his reality, pushing through the opening. It was old, a model from the 1970s, a Kenworth K100 with a long hood, its paint faded to ghost gray. The driver was visible through the windshield, hands on the wheel. But the Ace was wrong. Too many eyes, too many angles, a geometry that hurt to perceive. Keith screamed and jerked his wheel to the right, cutting back into the slow lane so hard that his trailer swayed dangerously. He heard the squeal of his tires, felt the truck fighting his control. He managed to straighten out, his heart slamming against his ribs. When he looked ahead, the backwards trailer was gone. The highway was empty. His CB was silent. His speedometer showed 68 miles per hour, and everything appeared normal. He checked his mirrors. The truck that had been behind him, the one whose driver claimed to see nothing, was also gone. Keith was alone on the interstate. He drove for another hour in a state of numb shock, barely aware of the road, before finally pulling into a truck stop near Spartanburg. He sat in his cab until dawn, drinking coffee that had gone cold hours ago, trying to convince himself he'd experienced a hallucination brought on by exhaustion, but he hadn't been tired. His logbook showed he'd had 9 hours of sleep before starting the drive. Keith checked his dashcam footage. The camera, mounted on his windshield, had recorded the entire encounter. The backwards trailer was there, clear as day. The doors opening, the other highway beyond, the ancient truck emerging. But there was something else in the footage that Keith hadn't noticed during the actual event. As the old Kenworth's cab pushed through the opening, the driver's face had turned to look directly at Keith's camera. In that frozen frame, Keith could see the face clearly. It was his own face, but decades older, withered, with those impossible extra eyes and wrong angles. The ancient driver was him. Keith erased the footage. He completed his delivery, then called his wife and told her he was coming home. He sold his truck within 2 weeks and took a job at a distribution center, working in a warehouse where the only roads he'd ever see were the ones outside the windows. 3 years later, Keith was diagnosed with early-onset dementia. The doctors couldn't explain its rapid progression. He began having episodes where he'd lose time, sometimes hours, with no memory of where he'd been. During one of these episodes, his wife found him in their garage, sitting in a folding chair, hands positioned as if gripping a steering wheel, making the motions of driving. When she asked him where he thought he was, Keith replied in a flat, distant voice, "Southbound 85, mile marker 12. I can see the backwards trailer ahead. I've been trying to pass it for 3 years, but I can't gain on it. I can't stop driving. The road goes on forever. He's in a care facility now." Sometimes the nurses report Keith's hands move in that driving motion. and he murmurs about highways and trailers and doors that open to places that shouldn't exist. His wife visited once and brought photos from their life together. Keith looked at them without recognition, but when she showed him a map of Interstate 85, his eyes focused, sharp and aware for just a moment. He pointed to a spot near the North Carolina-South Carolina border. "Mile marker 12, he whispered. "That's where I still am. This place, I'm not really here. I'm still on that highway, still trying to pass that truck. This is just what's happening in my mind while I drive. I've been driving for 3 years, and I'll drive forever. The backward trailer is pulling me through to that other road, and eventually, I'll be the one emerging from those doors, coming into someone else's world, trying to warn them. But they'll just run like I did." The doctors diagnosed it as confabulation, false memories created by his deteriorating condition. But Keith's wife checked the GPS records from his truck, the one he'd sold 3 years ago. The vehicle's current owner reported no issues, but the historical GPS data showed something odd. On the night of August 3, 2020, Keith's truck had disappeared from the tracking system for 17 minutes near mile marker 12 on Interstate 85. During those 17 minutes, the GPS had pinged from impossible locations, including coordinates that placed the truck 300 feet underground, then 50,000 feet in the air, then at coordinates that didn't correspond to any location on Earth. Keith knows he's still driving. This reality, the hospital, the dementia, it's just what his mind created to cope with the endless highway. Somewhere, on a road between worlds, Keith Drummond is still trying to pass that backwards trailer, and he always will be. Story 4th, the repeating mile. Patricia Cline had been driving for 7 years when she got trapped in what she can only describe as a loop in reality. It happened on January 19, 2022, during a late-night haul from Phoenix to Albuquerque along Interstate 40. Patricia was known for her punctuality. She kept meticulous logs, maintained her equipment perfectly, and never missed a deadline. That reliability made what happened to her even more disturbing. She entered the stretch of highway near the Arizona-New Mexico border at 2:15 a.m. The night was moonless, with thick clouds blocking any starlight. Her Volvo VNL was running smoothly, the engine's hum a familiar comfort. She passed mile marker 346, noting it in her mental log as she always did. This habit of tracking mile markers would later be the only thing that convinced her she wasn't losing her mind. 3 minutes later, she passed mile marker 346 again. Patricia frowned, certain she'd misread the number in the darkness. She slowed down slightly, watching more carefully. Her GPS showed her position moving forward normally, the blue line tracking her progress along I-40. But when the next marker appeared in her headlights, it read 346 again. Patricia's first thought was that the highway department had accidentally installed duplicate markers. It happened sometimes, bureaucratic errors that confused drivers. She continued forward, expecting to see mile marker 347 eventually. Instead, she passed marker 346 for a 4th time. She pulled over to the shoulder, her hazard lights flashing in the darkness. According to her GPS, she'd traveled 2.7 miles from the first time she'd seen marker 346. But the markers themselves insisted she'd been passing the same point repeatedly. She stepped out of her cab, flashlight in hand, and examined the marker she'd stopped beside. It was real, solid metal planted in concrete, the reflective numbers clearly reading 346. Patricia got back in her truck and called her dispatcher on her cell phone. The call went straight to a fast, busy signal, the kind you get when networks are down. She tried her CB radio, static on every channel, thick and oppressive, making her ears ache. She was alone with the problem. She decided to doctor. "I've forward at a slower speed, 40 miles per hour. counting seconds to measure distance. She would prove to herself that she was moving forward, that this was just a marker mistake. Patricia watched her odometer, watched the road, watched everything with intense focus. At exactly 2:33 a.m., she passed mile marker 346 again. Her odometer showed she'd driven 1.8 miles. Her GPS agreed, but the marker said otherwise. The loop was real. She was traveling forward through space, but somehow returning to the same physical point. Patricia felt her rationality straining against the impossibility. She was a practical person, someone who trusted in mechanics and physics and measurable reality. This couldn't be happening. She accelerated to 70, trying to somehow break through the loop by speed. Mile marker 346 appeared again and again and again. She passed it 17 times in 20 minutes, each passage making her feel more trapped, more desperate. Her fuel gauge was dropping normally. Her engine was consuming diesel, burning it in a perfectly ordinary way. But she was going nowhere. At 2:56 a.m., Patricia saw something new. Another truck parked on the shoulder ahead, its hazard lights flashing. Relief flooded through her. She wasn't alone. Someone else was here, someone who could confirm she wasn't hallucinating. She pulled up behind the vehicle and climbed out. The truck was a Volvo VNL, same model as hers, same color. That wasn't too unusual. Many companies used the same equipment. Patricia approached the cab and knocked on the door. No response. She tried the handle. The door was unlocked. She opened it and looked inside. The cab was empty, but the keys were in the ignition. And the engine was still warm. Personal items were scattered around, a coffee mug, a phone charger, a jacket draped over the passenger seat. Patricia grabbed the jacket to check for ID. The name embroidered on it read Patricia Klein. Her legs went weak. This was her jacket, the one she'd left at a truck stop in Flagstaff 2 days ago, the one she'd assumed someone had stolen. She looked at the coffee mug. It had the same chip on the rim as her mug. She checked the phone charger. Same brand and model. Patricia stumbled back to her own truck, her mind reeling. She looked at her cab. Her jacket was hanging on the passenger seat, but she'd just been holding an identical jacket in the other truck. She climbed into her cab and checked her belongings. Everything was present, including items she'd seen in the abandoned truck. She was looking at her own vehicle, duplicated, sitting 30 feet away. The loop wasn't just repeating space, it was copying everything, creating duplicates, layering reality on top of itself. Patricia made a decision. She would mark the road, leave physical evidence of her passage. She grabbed a road flare from her emergency kit, lit it, and placed it in the middle of the highway. Then she drove forward, watching her mirrors. The flare's red glow disappeared behind her. At exactly 3:07 a.m., she saw a red glow ahead, the flare, or a copy of it, burning in the road. She stopped and examined it. The flare was in the exact same position where she'd placed it, burned down to the same length, creating the same pattern of melted residue on the asphalt. Patricia was trapped in a mile that repeated itself, creating duplicates of everything that passed through it. How many versions of herself were now driving the same stretch? How many of her trucks were parked on the shoulder? She had no way to know. She drove forward again, faster now, desperate, and that's when she saw them. Trucks lining the shoulder, dozens of them, all Volvo VNLs, all the same model and color, all hers. Some had their doors open, some were dark and locked, some were running. Patricia was seeing the accumulated copies of her truck from every loop she'd driven. Then she saw the drivers, standing by their trucks or sitting in the cabs, visible in her headlights as she passed. All of them were her. Some looked terrified, some looked resigned, some were crying. One was screaming silently, mouth open, face contorted. Patricia looked away, unable to face her own multiplied despair. Her CB crackled to life. This is Klein on eastbound 40, mile marker 346. Her own voice, but she wasn't speaking. I'm stuck in some kind of loop. If anyone can hear this, I need help. More versions of her voice joined in, overlapping, creating a chorus of Patricia Kleins all calling for help, all describing the same impossible situation. Patricia grabbed her CB mic. Stop it. All of you, stop talking. I can't think. The voices paused. Then one replied, which one are you? Loop 23? Loop 40? I'm loop 67. I've been here for 4 hours. Another voice, weaker, more distant, loop 198. I don't remember what life was like before this mile. Was there ever anything else? Patricia threw the CB mic down. She focused on driving, on moving forward, on refusing to accept this reality. She pushed her truck to 85 miles per hour, engine roaring. The mile repeated. She tried driving backward, R&D, putting her transmission in reverse and backing up. The mile repeated in reverse. Marker 346, passing again and again. At 4:17 a.m., her fuel gauge hit empty. The engine sputtered. Patricia coasted to a stop. She sat in her dark cab, out of fuel, out of ideas. She would become one of the parked trucks, one of the abandoned vehicles lining this impossible mile. Another Patricia would drive past, see her sitting here, and keep trying to escape. But then, at exactly 4:30 a.m., something changed. A different mile marker appeared in her headlights, carried forward by momentum. Mile marker 347. Patricia stared at it, not daring to believe. She coasted on, fuel gauge reading empty but gravity pulling her slightly downhill. Mile marker 348. She was through. Her engine coughed and died. She coasted another quarter mile before stopping completely. Patricia sat in silence, then started laughing, a sound edged with hysteria. She was free. She called for a fuel delivery, told the service it was an emergency, and waited by the roadside for 2 hours until the tanker arrived. Patricia completed her delivery to Albuquerque, then drove straight to her company's terminal. She submitted her resignation that afternoon. The dispatcher checked her logs and found an anomaly. From 2:15 a.m. to 4:30 a.m., her GPS had recorded her traveling exactly 1.2 miles, despite her odometer showing she'd driven 74 miles during that time period. Patricia doesn't know how she escaped the loop. She doesn't know if the other versions of herself are still trapped there, still driving that single mile for eternity. Sometimes, late at night, she hears her own voice on a CB radio she no longer owns, calling for help. From mile marker 346, she knows that somewhere in some layer of reality she's still there, still trying to find mile marker 347, still burning fuel that never runs out, driving a road that never ends. She moved to Vermont and took a job at a bookstore. She hasn't driven a truck since January 2022, but every night she dreams she's back on that highway, passing mile marker 346, watching herself multiply into an endless chorus of trapped drivers, all of them her, all of them screaming into CB radios that no one answers. Story 5th, the cargo that wasn't there. Dennis Morton accepted a job that seemed simple enough. Pick up a sealed container from a warehouse in Memphis, deliver it to a facility in Birmingham. No questions, no inspection of contents, just standard hauling. The pay was double his usual rate, which should have been a warning, but Dennis had bills to pay. This was September 2018, and he needed the money. The pickup went smoothly. The container was a standard 20-footer sealed with customs locks that Dennis wasn't authorized to open. The paperwork listed the contents as mechanical components, which was vague but not unusual. The weight felt right when he coupled the trailer, maybe 15,000 pounds. Everything seemed legitimate. Dennis left Memphis at 7 p.m., planning to drive through the night and arrive in Birmingham by morning. The route took him south on Highway 78, a decent road he'd traveled before. The evening was clear, temperature mild, perfect driving conditions. Around 10:30 p.m., Dennis felt the trailer shift. It was subtle, just a slight change in how the weight pulled on his fifth wheel. He checked his mirrors. The trailer looked normal, tracking straight behind him. He figured the cargo had settled. Maybe something had shifted in the container. Not uncommon, especially if the load hadn't been secured properly. 10 minutes later, the shift happened again, more pronounced this time. The trailer seemed to lighten, like he'd lost weight. Dennis frowned. Cargo didn't just disappear. He pulled over at the next wide spot in the road, grabbed his flashlight, and walked back to inspect the trailer. The container was intact. The seals were unbroken. Nothing appeared wrong from the outside. Dennis walked around the trailer, checking the tires, the lights, the structure. Everything was fine. But when he grabbed the trailer's frame and pushed, testing its weight, something felt wrong. The trailer rocked too easily, like it was empty. Dennis climbed back in his cab and checked the paperwork again. The bill of lading listed the cargo weight at 14,800 pounds. But his truck's air suspension gauge, which measured trailer weight, was now showing only 3,200 pounds. He'd lost over 11,000 pounds of cargo without the seals being broken. He called the company that had hired him. The number went to voicemail. He tried the warehouse in Memphis. Same result. Dennis was alone with a mystery that violated basic physics. Cargo doesn't vanish from sealed containers. He decided to continue driving. Maybe the weight gauge was malfunctioning. He'd report the discrepancy when he delivered the container and let the Birmingham facility figure it out. Dennis pulled back onto Highway 78 and resumed his route. At 11:47 p.m., he heard a sound from the trailer. Not a shifting of cargo, but a metallic tapping, rhythmic and deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. Pow. Seh. Tap, tap, tap. Like something inside was hitting the container walls, trying to communicate. Dennis felt his skin prickle. Mechanical components don't tap. The sound continued for 5 minutes, then stopped. Dennis turned off his radio, listening intently. Silence. He told himself it was metal expanding and contracting with temperature changes, a rational explanation. But the night was warm, and temperatures hadn't changed enough to cause that kind of noise. The tapping resumed at midnight, faster this time. Tap, 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 tap. It sounded urgent, almost frantic. Dennis grabbed his CB radio. "This is Morton on southbound 78, mile marker 93. I'm hauling a sealed container that's making noises. Anyone ever experienced cargo that taps?" A driver responded after a moment. "You mean like shifting in there?" "Yeah, happens all the time." Dennis shook his head, even though the other driver couldn't see him. "No, not shifting, tapping. Deliberate patterns, like Morse code or something." The CB was silent for a long moment. Then the driver replied, "Brother, you might want to pull over and call your dispatcher. That doesn't sound right." Dennis had already tried that. He was on his own. He drove on, the tapping continuing at irregular intervals, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, always in patterns that seemed intentional. At 12:45 a.m., Dennis's trailer weight gauge dropped to 0. According to his instruments, he was pulling an empty trailer, but he could feel the weight, could feel the drag on his truck. The disconnect between his senses and his instruments made him dizzy. Reality was becoming negotiable. Then the temperature in his cab dropped. Dennis watched his breath mist. In the air, watched frost form on his windshield despite the heater running full blast. The cold was coming from behind him, seeping through the cab's back wall from the direction of the trailer. The tapping stopped. In the sudden silence, Dennis heard something worse. Breathing, deep, slow breaths, like a large animal sleeping. The sound was coming through his CB radio, even though no one was transmitting. The speaker exhaled and inhaled, the rhythm steady and impossible. Dennis turned off the CB. The breathing continued, now coming from his truck's sound system through speakers that shouldn't be able to receive CB signals. He turned off the radio. The breathing shifted to his phone, the speaker emitting those deep, measured breaths. He turned off his phone. The breathing came from everywhere, from the air itself surrounding him. "Stop," Dennis whispered. "Please stop." The breathing stopped. The temperature in his cab returned to normal. The trailer weight gauge flickered, then showed 14,800 pounds again. Everything was suddenly as it should be. Dennis felt relief flood through him, followed immediately by deeper dread. Something had heard him. Something had responded to his plea. His phone, still turned off, lit up. A text message appeared on the screen from a number that was all zeros. The message read, "You're not hauling cargo. You're hauling the space where cargo used to be. Don't look inside." Dennis stared at the message, his mind refusing to process it. You can't haul empty space. Empty space isn't cargo. But the weight gauge agreed. He had 14,800 pounds of nothing in that container, against every instinct screaming at him to leave it alone. Dennis Paul led over again. He walked to the back of the trailer, bolt cutters in hand. He was going to open the container. He had to know what he was really carrying. The seals were custom jobs, hardened steel that his bolt cutters couldn't touch. Dennis returned to his cab and retrieved his angle grinder. He would cut the seals off, open the doors, and see what was inside. This was stupid. This was dangerous. This was necessary. He cut through the first seal, the grinder's sparks bright in the darkness. The seal fell away. He moved to the second seal and cut through it as well. Now only the locking bar remained. Dennis grabbed the handle and pulled. The doors swung open. Dennis pointed his flashlight into the container and saw nothing. Not the nothing of an empty space, but nothing itself. The interior of the container was an absence, a void that his flashlight couldn't illuminate. The beam entered the opening and simply stopped existing, swallowed by the darkness. Dennis stepped closer, drawn by horrible fascination. The void inside the container seemed to move, to pulse, like it was breathing. He could feel it pulling at him, a gentle but insistent force, trying to draw him inside. He heard the voice in his head, not through his ears, but directly in his thoughts. "Come inside. You're already inside. You've been inside since Memphis. This whole drive has been you falling into the container. When you reach Birmingham, you'll open the doors and find yourself standing on the road in Memphis, about to start the drive again. You've done this 47 times. You'll do it 47 more. The container doesn't hold cargo. It holds loops of time, and you're trapped in one." Dennis screamed and slammed the container doors shut. He couldn't reseal them, but he could close them. He ran to his cab, started the engine, and drove away at dangerous speed, the trailer bouncing behind him, the unsealed doors rattling. He drove straight to Birmingham without stopping, arriving at 6:30 a.m. The facility was an unmarked warehouse on the outskirts of the city. 2 workers were waiting. They didn't seem surprised that Dennis arrived 4 hours early, or that the seals were cut, or that he looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "You opened it," one of them said. "It wasn't a question." Dennis nodded. "What was supposed to be in there?" The worker shrugged. "Nothing. That's what we're storing. Concentrated nothing. Empty space from places where reality collapsed. We keep it in containers so it doesn't spread. You just exposed yourself to a Class 4 void. You've got about 3 days before you stop existing." Dennis laughed, a sound without humor. "That's insane. You're insane. Nothing isn't something you can store." The worker handed him an envelope filled with cash, double the promised rate. "You'll start forgetting things first. Your history, your memories, your name. Then people will forget you. Your wife won't recognize you. Your friends will have no memory of you existing. By day 3, you'll fade completely. There'll be no record you were ever born. The void consumes everything, including the past." Dennis took the money and left. He drove home to Jackson, Mississippi, walked into his house, and hugged his wife. She hugged him back, and for a moment, Everything felt normal. Then she pulled away and looked at him with confusion. "I'm sorry, do I know you? How did you get in my house?" Dennis is gone now. Not dead, just gone. No one remembers him. His trucking company has no record of employing anyone named Dennis Morton. His wife is happily married to a man she's been with for 15 years. No memory of any previous relationship. Dennis's parents have photos of their family, but in the pictures, there's often an odd empty space where someone should be standing, a gap in the composition that makes no sense. There's a man who lives in a homeless shelter in Birmingham who claims his name is Dennis. He has no ID, no past, no social security number in any database. He tells anyone who'll listen about a container full of nothing, about a void that consumes existence itself. People think he's mentally ill. Maybe he is. Or maybe he's what's left when someone gets erased by the nothing, a ghost that even reality has forgotten. The container is still at that warehouse in Birmingham. Sometimes, late at night, workers hear tapping from inside. They've learned not to open it. Inside are 47 different time loops, each one containing a driver making a delivery that never ends, opening doors to see themselves standing in Memphis about to begin the same trip. Dennis is in there somewhere, trapped in the nothing, driving forever through a route that consumes itself. Story 6th, the transmission from nowhere. Leo Vasquez was hauling refrigerated goods from Sacramento to Portland in February 2021, a routine run he'd made hundreds of times. His Kenworth T680 was equipped with the latest technology, including a high-end CB system that could pick up transmissions from impressive distances. Leo liked staying connected to other drivers, finding comfort in the voices that broke up the monotony of long hauls. At 1:15 a.m., somewhere between Redding and Eureka on Interstate 5, Leo's CB erupted with a transmission that changed everything. A voice, male, strained with panic, broke through. "Mayday, Mayday. This is driver 447 on northbound 5. Mile marker, I don't know." The markers stopped making sense. "Something's following my truck. It's not another vehicle. I can't describe it. It's moving alongside me, matching my speed, but it's not touching the road." Leo keyed his mic immediately. "This is Vasquez on northbound 5, mile marker 698. What's your location, driver?" "I can contact CHP." Static answered him. The panicked voice continued as if it hadn't heard Leo's response. "The thing, it's getting closer. It's pushing against my trailer. I can feel it. My truck's being forced toward the shoulder. I'm trying to maintain control, but..." The transmission cut off with a sound like tearing metal and breaking glass, followed by absolute silence. Leo felt his blood run cold. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911, reporting a possible accident on I-5, providing the details from the transmission. The dispatcher took his information but seemed confused. "Sir, we have no reports of accidents on that highway tonight. Can you provide a more specific location?" Leo couldn't. Driver 447 hadn't given one. He continued driving, scanning the roadside for any signs of a wreck. Nothing. For the next 30 miles, the highway was empty and peaceful, showing no evidence of the catastrophe he'd just heard. At 2:03 a.m., the transmission resumed. The same voice, the same panic, the same words. "Mayday, Mayday. This is driver 447 on northbound 5, aisle marker, I don't know." The markers stopped making sense. "Something's following my truck." Leo's hands tightened on his steering wheel. The transmission was repeating. He listened to the entire sequence again, identical to the first time, ending with the same crash sounds. Then silence. 20 minutes later, it repeated again, and again 20 minutes after that. Leo was hearing a recording, or a loop, or something that defied explanation. A driver calling for help from a moment frozen in time, replaying endlessly through CB frequencies. At 3 a.m., Leo tried something. When the transmission started again, he responded immediately. Driver 447, this is Vasquez. Can you hear me? What mile marker are you near? I'm trying to help you. To his shock, the voice responded, not with the scripted words Leo had heard 5 times now, but with new ones. Vasquez? Thank God. Someone can hear me. I'm at mile marker 447. The thing is still here. It's been here for, I don't know how long. Time doesn't work right anymore. Leo checked his GPS. Mile marker 447 was over 200 miles behind him, down near Sacramento. You're south of me, but I can turn around. Hold on, the voice replied, desperation cracking through. No, don't. Whatever you do, don't come looking for me. I think I'm dead. I think I died in the crash. But I'm still here, still driving, still trying to outrun this thing. I can see other trucks passing through my location. I can see you right now, Vasquez. I'm looking at your Kenworth T680. You're hauling reefer. License plate 7XR 4923. Leo glanced at his side mirror, where his California plate was partially visible. That was his license number. This driver could LDC him, despite being 200 miles away. How is that possible? The voice answered, because distance doesn't mean what you think it means here. I'm not at mile marker 447 in your world. I'm at mile marker 447 in the place where accidents create ghosts. And that place overlaps with every mile of this highway. Leo's CB suddenly filled with more voices, dozens of them, all transmitting at once. Each one was a driver in distress, each one describing impossible situations. A woman screaming about her truck driving itself. A man calmly stating that his GPS showed him in 3 locations simultaneously. Another voice describing how his odometer was running backward, returning him to his starting point with each mile. We're all here. Driver 447's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone who died on I-5. Everyone who had an accident that left them between life and death. Everyone who got lost in the spaces between mile markers. We're all broadcasting on this frequency, trying to warn the living. Don't stop. Don't investigate. Don't try to help us. We're beyond help. Leo felt tears running down his face. What happened to you? Driver 447's voice softened. I swerved to avoid something. I don't even remember what anymore. Deer, maybe, or a person or something that looked like both. My truck rolled 7 times, I think. I remember each one. The impact should have killed me instantly, but it didn't. I kept driving. I pulled myself out of the wreckage, got back in my cab and kept going. Because that's what we do. We drive. Even when we're dead, we drive. The chorus of voices swelled again, each one sharing their story, their death, their endless route. Leo heard a driver who'd had a heart attack at the wheel in 1987, another who'd jackknifed in a snowstorm in 2003, a third who'd simply disappeared from a rest stop in 2015, leaving his truck running, and now existed only as a voice on the CB, calling out his location every 20 minutes for 6 years. Turn off your radio, Driver 447 urged. If you listen too long, you'll become one of us. The frequency is a trap. It connects the dead and the living, and if you stay tuned in, you'll get pulled across. You'll have your accident, whatever it is, whatever's meant to take you. And then you'll be broadcasting too, warning the next driver who won't listen either. Leo reached for his CB power switch, but his hand froze. He couldn't do it. These were drivers, his people, his community. They were alone in their deaths, still trying to do their job, still trying to help. Turning off the radio felt like abandoning them. Please, Driver 47's voice was begging now. Don't make my warning meaningless. Drive away, forget this frequency. Live your life, deliver your cargo, Go home to your family. Let us be forgotten. That's the only kindness you can give us." Leo forced his hand to move. He switched off the CB. Silence filled his cab, oppressive and complete. He drove the remaining distance to Portland in that silence, refusing to turn the radio back on, refusing to hear their voices. He made his delivery at 7:30 a.m. The receiving clerk noticed Leo's shaken appearance and asked if he was all right. Leo nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He got back in his truck and started the return trip to Sacramento. At mile marker 447, Leo saw something that made him stop. A memorial marker stood on the shoulder, one of thousands along America's highways, marking spots where lives ended. This one was old, weathered, the text barely readable. Leo got out and approached it. The marker read, "Driver 447, unknown name, died here 1952. The voice Leo had spoken to belonged to someone who'd been dead for 69 years. Leo stumbled back to his truck and sat there for an hour, watching traffic pass, trying to reconcile what he knew was real with what he knew was impossible. He never turned his CB back on. For the remaining 3 years of his driving career, Leo traveled in silence, refusing to connect with other drivers, refusing to risk hearing that frequency again. He retired in 2024, sold his truck, and moved to a small town in Oregon, where the nearest highway was 10 miles away. But sometimes, late at night, Leo's truck's CB radio turns itself on. He doesn't own the truck anymore, sold it to a fleet company, but he can hear it in his mind, clear as if it were sitting in his driveway. The voices of the dead drivers, still broadcasting, still warning, still trying to protect the living from joining their eternal convoy. Driver 447 is still out there, calling Mayday into the void, replaying his death every 20 minutes, visible to every driver who passes mile marker 447 between midnight and dawn. If you're ever on I-5 in California, late at night, and your CB picks up a distress call from a driver who can't find his mile markers, don't respond. Don't try to help. Just keep driving and pray that when your time comes, you don't become another voice on the NC, another ghost truck broadcasting from nowhere, forever trying to warn drivers who will never listen. The facility that moved. Rachel Zimmerman specialized in high-security deliveries, transporting classified materials for defense contractors. Her clearance level was impressive, her record spotless. In November 2019, she received a contract for what seemed like a standard job: deliver a sealed container to a facility in rural Nevada. The coordinates were provided via GPS, the route was specified, and the pay was excellent. Rachel accepted without hesitation. She picked up the container from a warehouse in Las Vegas. The cargo's weight was moderate, around 8,000 pounds. The paperwork was minimal, just a delivery code and GPS coordinates. No facility name, no contact information. Unusual, but not unprecedented in her line of work. Rachel left Las Vegas at 3 p.m., taking Highway 95 north into the desert. The facility was supposed to be about 180 miles away, putting her arrival time around 6:30 p.m. The drive was uneventful until she reached the turnoff point, 147 miles north. Her GPS directed her to exit onto a dirt road. Rachel had delivered to remote locations before. Off-grid facilities were common in government work. She took the exit and followed the unpaved road into increasingly desolate terrain. The road was well maintained despite being unpaved, suggesting regular use. After 12 miles, her GPS indicated she was approaching the destination. Rachel slowed, scanning the landscape. A facility came into view, a cluster of low concrete buildings surrounded by high fencing, exactly as she'd expected. She pulled up to the gate, where a security guard checked her credentials, verified her delivery code, and waved her through. The unloading process took 15 minutes. Workers transferred the container to a loading dock, scanned Rachel's delivery confirmation, and sent her on her way. Everything was professional and routine. Rachel returned to her truck, turned around, and headed back to the main highway. After driving for 20 minutes, Rachel noticed something odd. According to her GPS, she'd traveled 9 miles from the facility, but the road ahead looked wrong. It was wider than she remembered, the surface smoother. She checked her odometer. 9 miles was correct, but the landscape surrounding her didn't match her memory of the drive-in. Rachel stopped and examined her GPS history. The route she'd taken to the facility was clearly marked, but her current position didn't align with that route. She was on a different road, one that her GPS insisted didn't exist. She tried to recalculate, but the system showed her position as a blank area on the map, marked only as no data available. She decided to continue forward, assuming the GPS was glitching. After another 10 minutes, she saw a sign for Highway 95, which made sense. She should be reaching the main highway soon. Rachel turned onto the highway and headed south, toward Las Vegas, but the mile markers were wrong. She should have been near mile marker 162 based on where she'd turned off. Instead, the markers read mile marker 234, placing her 70 miles north of where she should be. Rachel pulled over, her mind racing. She'd driven 12 miles to the facility, spent 15 minutes there, driven back 9 miles, then reached the highway. Her truck's odometer confirmed this sequence. But somehow, she'd emerged 70 miles from where she'd entered. Called her contact at the defense contractor. The number went to a recording. The number you have dialed is not in service. She tried the emergency contact on her paperwork, same result. She was disconnected from her support network, alone on a highway that disagreed with her reality. She decided to return to the facility to demand an explanation. Rachel turned around and headed north, looking for the dirt road turnoff. According to her earlier GPS data, it should be at mile marker 162. She drove carefully, watching for the exit. Mile marker 162 came and went, no turnoff. She continued another 20 miles north, then south again, searching. The road was gone. Rachel stopped at a gas station in Tonopah and asked the attendant about facilities in the area. The man looked at her strangely. Military stuff? Yeah, there's test ranges and such, but they're way out east, not along this highway. You might be thinking of Nellis or the old proving grounds. Rachel showed him the coordinates from her delivery paperwork. The attendant plugged them into his computer. These coordinates are in the middle of nowhere. No structures, no roads, just open desert. Rachel drove back to the coordinates anyway. She turned off the highway where her GPS insisted the turnoff should be. There was no road, just scrub brush and rocky terrain, completely undrivable. She got out of her truck and walked into the desert, following the GPS track on her phone. After a quarter mile, she found something. Tire tracks in the sand, recent ones, matching the width of her truck's wheelbase. She followed them for another half-mile. The tracks led to a flat area of disturbed ground where something large had clearly been parked. Multiple vehicle tracks crisscrossed the area, along with footprints and equipment marks. But there was no facility, no buildings, no fencing, nothing. Rachel stood in the empty desert and tried to understand. She had been to a facility, she had delivered cargo, she had interacted with security guards and workers. It had been real, but now there was only empty sand, and the ghost of tire tracks proving she'd been here. She returned to her truck and examined the delivery confirmation on her tablet. The document showed the date, time, and delivery code. But the facility name field was blank, and the signature from the receiving worker was a string of random characters, not a name. The location field showed the coordinates, but beneath them was a line of text Rachel hadn't noticed before. Temporal variance, 17 hours. Spatial variance, 47 miles. Rachel felt her reality cracking. The facility had been in a different time. 17 hours in the future or past, she couldn't tell. And it was physically displaced by 47 miles from where it appeared to be. She had driven through some kind of gap in space-time, delivering cargo to a location that existed sideways to normal reality. She tried to research the delivery code, searching for any reference online. The code returned 0 results. The defense contractor company that had hired her had no website, no business registration, no existence outside the documents she carried. Rachel had worked for a ghost company to deliver cargo to a facility that phased in and out of reality. Over the next week, Rachel attempted to make sense of her experience. She contacted physicists, filed reports with various agencies, tried to find other drivers who'd made similar deliveries. She found nothing concrete, only rumors, whispers about mobile facilities that moved through dimensions, testing equipment that required isolation from normal spacetime, theories about classified projects that existed outside standard reality to prevent surveillance or interference. Rachel never received payment for the delivery. The account information for the contractor was invalid. The woman she'd been working with had an email address that bounced back. Every connection to the job had evaporated, leaving Rachel with only her memories and a delivery confirmation that made no sense. 6 months later, Rachel received a new contract. Same GPS coordinates, same delivery code, same mysterious contractor. The pay was triple her usual rate. Rachel stared at the offer for hours, her hand hovering over the accept button. She wanted to refuse, to never go back to that shifting desert facility. But she also needed to know, was it still there? Would it be in the same place? Did time and space remain stable, or did the facility drift further with each visit? Rachel accepted the job. She made the delivery in May 2020 following the same route. This time, the turnoff was at mile marker 184, 22 miles from where it had been before. The facility looked identical but was oriented differently, rotated 90 degrees from its previous layout. The guard at the gate was the same person, but when Rachel mentioned having been there before, he looked at her with no recognition. "First timer?" he asked, checking her credentials. Rachel didn't argue. She has made 17 deliveries since then, each one to the same facility in a different location. The coordinates change every time. Sometimes the facility is in Nevada, sometimes Utah once it appeared in Arizona, 300 miles from the original site. The workers never remember her. The GPS data always shows temporal and spatial variances, the numbers growing larger with each delivery. Rachel knows she's transporting something to a place that exists outside normal reality, a facility that moves through space-time like a submarine through water, surfacing briefly to receive cargo before submerging again. She doesn't know what they're building there, what purpose requires such extreme isolation. She only knows that she's one of the few people who can navigate the gaps to reach it. The pay keeps increasing. Rachel keeps accepting. She has become a courier between worlds, driving routes that shift beneath her wheels, delivering to coordinates that change with each contract. She doesn't talk about it anymore. The few people she told thought she was insane or lying. So Rachel drives in silence, watching the desert, waiting for her GPS to guide her off-highway onto roads that don't exist, toward facilities that occupy the spaces between moments. Last month, the facility wasn't there. Rachel arrived at the coordinates, followed the turnoff, drove the 12 miles. Nothing, just empty desert. She waited for 6 hours, thinking maybe she'd arrive during a phase shift, that the facility would materialize. It never did. Eventually, she returned to Vegas with the cargo still in her trailer. The contractor called her 3 days later. "You missed the window." Rachel asked what "hat" meant. "The facility is moving to a new time period. It won't return to this decade. Your services are no longer required." The line went dead. Rachel still has the cargo. It sits in a storage unit in Las Vegas, a sealed container weighing 8,000 pounds, contents unknown. Sometimes she visits it, placing her hand on the cold metal, wondering what's inside, wondering where it was supposed to go, wondering if somewhere in a different time, a different Rachel successfully made that final delivery. She still receives contracts occasionally, always from companies that don't exist, always to coordinate that shift. She turns them all down now. Rachel has retired from the routes that move. She hauls normal cargo to normal places and tries not to think about the facility that drifts through space-time, forever building something in the nowhere spaces, waiting for deliveries that may never arrive. Story 8th, the driver who never left. Thomas Hayes was a legendary driver in the trucking community. 53 years old, 30 years of experience, and a safety record that was flawless. He was the person newer drivers called for advice, the man who could handle any route, any weather, any challenge. In August 2017, Thomas accepted a long-haul job from Seattle to Miami, a cross-country run that would take 4 days. He left Seattle on August 7th at 6 a.m. He never arrived in Miami. According to official records, Thomas Hayes simply vanished. His truck, a blue Peterbilt 579, disappeared from GPS tracking on August 10th, somewhere in Texas. His last known communication was a CB transmission near Amarillo, reporting normal conditions and expected arrival in Miami on schedule. After that silence. Search efforts found nothing. No wreckage, no evidence of an accident, no indication of foul play. Thomas's family filed missing person reports. His company launched an investigation. The FBI got involved due to the interstate nature of the disappearance. Nothing was ever found. Thomas Hayes and his truck had simply ceased to exist. But the story doesn't end there. Drivers began reporting sightings of Thomas's truck, not occasionally but constantly. Nearly every day someone would see a blue Peterbilt 579 matching Thomas's vehicle, usually at night, usually on stretches of highway between Seattle and Miami. The truck would appear in mirrors, would pass other vehicles, would sit in parking lots at rest stops. Sometimes drivers would approach, thinking Thomas had been found, only to see the cab was empty. Julia Mendez saw Thomas's truck in April 2018, 9 months after his disappearance. She was hauling freight across I-40 in Arizona when the blue Peterbilt passed her around 2 a.m. Julia recognized it immediately. She'd known Thomas, had taken his advice when she was new to the industry. She grabbed her CB. "Tommy Hayes, is that you in the blue Pete? This is Julia Mendez. Your family's looking for you." The response came through static. Thomas's voice, tired and confused. "Julia, how long has it been? I've been trying to complete this delivery. I can't find Miami. My GPS keeps resetting. I've been driving for, I don't know anymore. Days? Weeks? Why can't I get there?" Julia was crying as she responded. "Tommy, you've been missing for 9 months. Pull over. Let me help you." The blue Peterbilt ahead of her began to slow. Julia matched its speed. Prep, airing to pull over together. But as they approached the shoulder, the truck faded. Not driving away, but becoming transparent, like a ghost dissolving in dawn light. Within seconds, it was gone. Julia stopped anyway, sitting on the shoulder for an hour, crying and calling Thomas's name on the CB. Other drivers heard her transmission and asked what was happening. When Julia explained, she was met with silence. Then one driver spoke up. "I've seen that truck too. 3 weeks ago, on I-10 in Louisiana. Tried to follow it. Same thing happened. It It just faded away. More drivers shared their stories. The blue Peterbilt appeared on highways across the country, always traveling routes between Seattle and Miami, always driving at night, always occupied by the ghost of Thomas Hayes, still trying to complete his delivery. He would appear for minutes or hours, responding to CB calls, asking for directions, describing his confusion and exhaustion. Then he would fade, returning to whatever impossible route he was trapped on. Megan Torres, Thomas's daughter, decided to find him. She obtained her CDL license and started driving trucks, specifically taking routes between Seattle and Miami, hoping to encounter her father. In January 2019, she succeeded. Thomas's blue Peterbilt appeared behind her truck on I-40 in Oklahoma. Megan grabbed her CB, her voice shaking. "Dad? It's Megan, please talk to me." The response was immediate. "Megan? Baby, you shouldn't be out here, it's not safe. Something's wrong with this route. I keep driving, but I never arrive. The days blend together. I see other trucks, but when I try to talk to drivers, they don't hear me. You're the first person who's respond. Dead in, I don't know how long." Megan was sobbing. "Dad, you've been gone for 18 months. We thought you were dead. Where are you?" Thomas's voice was strained. "I'm on I-40 heading east. I'm trying to reach Miami. I have a delivery. I can't stop until I complete the delivery." Megan looked at her GPS. She was on I-40 heading east. Her father was describing the same road, the same direction, but he was somewhere else, some parallel version of the highway that only he could travel. "Dad, stop the truck. Pull over. This doesn't make sense. You need to stop," Thomas replied. "I can't. I've tried. When I take my foot off the accelerator, the truck keeps moving. When I hit the brakes, nothing happens. I'm locked in at 68 miles per hour. The cruise control won't disengage. I've been at this speed for, I don't even know anymore. Months, maybe. I'm so tired, Megan, I can't sleep. When I close my eyes, I'm still driving. I see the road behind my eyelids." Megan stayed on the CB with her father for 3 hours, driving alongside his ghost truck, even though she couldn't see it. They talked about family, about memories, about the life Thomas was missing. He asked about his wife, his grandchildren, the world he'd left behind. Megan answered everything, trying to maintain the connection. Then Thomas's voice changed, becoming distant. "Megan, something's happening. The road ahead is different. The mile markers are counting down instead of up. I'm going backward, but the truck is moving forward. I don't understand what's happening. Dad, stay with me, keep talking." Megan was desperate, terrified of losing the connection. Thomas replied, his voice fading. "I see the delivery point. Miami. It's ahead of me, but it's not real Miami. The buildings are wrong. The sky is wrong. Everything's wrong. But maybe if I complete the delivery, I can stop. Maybe that's what I need to do." "No, Dad, don't." Megan's transmission was cut off by static. Thomas's voice came through one last time, barely audible. "I'm going to deliver the cargo. I'm going to finish the job. Tell your mother I love her. Tell her I tried to come home." The CB went silent. Megan pulled over, screaming into the radio, begging for her father to respond. Nothing. She sat on the shoulder until dawn, waiting, hoping. Thomas's truck never appeared again. Megan filed reports with every authority she could think of, describing the encounter. Most dismissed it as grief-induced hallucination, but the CB recordings were real. Megan had recorded the entire conversation. Thomas Hayes' voice was on those recordings, clear and undeniable. Other drivers still report seeing Thomas's blue Peterbilt, but the sightings changed after Megan's encounter. Now the truck appears to be driving faster, more erratically. Thomas no longer responds to CB calls. The truck is seen at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour, racing towards something, desperate to complete a delivery that exists in a version of Miami that overlaps with our world, but remains forever out of reach. There's a theory among some drivers. They believe Thomas encountered a temporal anomaly, a glitch in reality that trapped him in an endless delivery loop. Each time he gets close to Miami, the destination shifts, pushing further away, keeping him on the road forever. He's stuck in a moment that never ends, driving the same route for eternity, never aging, never stopping, never delivering. Megan eventually stopped driving trucks. The road held too many ghosts for her, but she keeps her CB radio on in her car, tuned to channel 19, the main trucker frequency. Every night, she listens, hoping to hear her father's voice one more time. Sometimes, late at night, when conditions are right, she hears fragments. Thomas's voice, broken and distorted, still calling out mile markers, still describing his location, still trying to complete his delivery. If you're a driver on any highway between Seattle and Miami, keep your radio on. If you see a blue Peterbilt 579 traveling alone at night, try to make contact. Thomas Hayes is still out there, still driving, still trapped on a route that never ends. He's the driver who never left, the ghost truck that haunts America's highways, a reminder that some deliveries can never be completed. Some roads have no destination, and some journeys trap you forever in the moment of departure, never allowing you to arrive. His family holds a vigil every August 7th, the anniversary of his disappearance. Drivers from across the country participate, pulling over at 6 a.m., the time Thomas left Seattle, and calling his name on their CB radios. For 1 minute, hundreds of voices fill the airwaves, trying to reach the man who's been driving for 7 years without rest, without sleep, without hope of arrival. And sometimes, for just a moment, Thomas responds. His voice, weary but unbroken, answers back, "This is Hayes on I-40, mile marker unknown. Still heading east. Still trying to deliver. Still on the road. Always on the road."